welcome everyone. My name is Claudia, and I want to thank you for joining us to this virtual roundtable series of the Platinum community that are taking place every 2 weeks. Before we start, I would like to inform you that all attendees will have their cameras turned off and their microphones muted. Before we finish, panelists will be given a space for questions using the question and answer tool located at the bottom of the screen. Today's topic is COVID and beyond. What needs to be done to capitalize on the current growth in remittances to ensure future sustainability? We are honored to have Mr. Leon Isaacs as our host. He's CEO at Developing Markets, Mr. Richard Muriithi, Head of Remittances at MTN Group, and Mr. Andrew Takyi-Appiah, Director at Zeepay. So I'll just mute myself, Leon, and I'll leave this to you. I'll leave the audio to you.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much indeed, Claudia. And it's a pleasure to be here hosting Richard and Andrew, two very experienced and successful digital experts based in Africa. So I'll allow them to introduce themselves later after I've made some initial comments. But just to say, this round table is really prompted by what we've seen happening this year, particularly obviously around the digital payments, digital remittances space. And I think for those of you who are even not quite as old as I am, will know that for many years, the use of digital remittances has been forecast and held up as a great way to do business. Hey, Andrew, very welcome.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, Richard. Sorry, network issues.
Not a problem. Right, we just started with the, I'm just doing an introduction, Andrew, so okay. We'll come to you shortly. Thanks very much. So, you know, what was I? Just back at, digital has really been held up as the way that remittances will be done in the future. And I think if you look at the reasons why people have got so excited in the past around digital is because all the indicators show that not only is it tremendously efficient and fast, but it also tackles the area of the cost associated with remittances. As many of you know, the World Bank remittance prices worldwide says that remittance prices are 6.67% on average at the moment. GSMA back in 2017 did a study that showed that sending money from mobile to mobile is actually 1.7%, which is already lower than the global targets. So I think lots of people have been talking about how remittances can address many of the challenges in remittances, costs, efficiency, and financial inclusion. But if you actually look at the usage and how remittances were sent up until the beginning of this year, really, around 90% of remittances involved cash. So despite digital being very popular and a lot of effort, the actual acceptance and usage by customers was significantly lower than the promise we wanted it to deliver. And I think this is where COVID has really changed things quite significantly in a number of ways. So the COVID crisis, as we all know, resulted in many lockdowns and closures, physical businesses with agencies being closed in many of the main sending markets, particularly in Europe and to an extent North America. And what this really meant was that many people just couldn't send money using the traditional cash-based measures. So if they wanted to send money, they had to switch to digital. So I think there's been a sort of an obvious switch in customers and to an extent their mindset. But I think importantly, we've seen a big change in the dialogue that has been happening around remittances since the crisis came on. And you look at some of the traditional remittance companies, your Western Unions and MoneyGrams, they are now constantly displaying or putting out information saying how important digital is to them and how the uptake in their transaction volumes is. You know, I think Western Union did 16% of their transactions digitally in Q1 by the end of April and also at the end of May. So in April and May, they were doing 30% of their transactions through digital. So there's been a dialogue from the traditional players. Some of the digital-only operators have been talking about doubling their client enrollments on a monthly basis during the crisis. I think the media is much more inclined to cover digital stories than before. And governments have really woken up to actually the changes that are taking place in awareness. And I guess that sort of prompted the topic for today's discussion, which is to say there is a lot of interest right now. If you look at how things are moving, we probably may have moved the needle from 10% to 20 or 25% of transactions going digitally. I think the question is what happens if, and let's hopefully it's sooner rather than later, we make progress with addressing COVID, is will people stay with digital or will they actually go back to their old methods that they were using? And also, is it actually practical for all global transactions to go digital, or are there some fundamental barriers that we also need to address in terms of how we can actually, or whether we can move people to digital? So I think that was the sort of background, and I'm going to shortly ask Richard and Andrew to explain about their businesses and comment on that. But before then, there's some other things that thoughts that I wanted to share. One is that, and this is probably more for my benefit than everyone else, but there seems to be lots of different definitions of digital out there as well. If you look at it, how some of the, let's say, more traditional money transfer companies and even the online sending companies talk about digital, it will probably be a digital transaction is one where there is a digital involvement at either the sending or the receiving end. So you could have cash being credited to a bank account or a mobile wallet. For many of these companies will count as digital, or you could have originating online, paying with a bank card in a send country, but the receiver collecting cash at the other end. That would also count as digital. To my mind, that's only addressing half of the challenge, because if we really want to make services as effective and efficient as possible, and if we really want to get prices down, I believe we have to have digital at both the sending and receiving end, and accepting digital could be an online service or it could be using a mobile wallet. But also we need fully automated processes for the middle mile as well, so truly digital. And it'll be very interesting to hear panel's thoughts on that and how close we might be to that. I think some of the other things that we need to look at are, if you look at the state of digital payments around the world, obviously we normally look at Africa as a receiving continent, particularly for mobile money, but then we look at Asia as quite a strong continent, parts of Asia, for receiving money into a bank account and growing as well. But digital takes different forms in different areas, and I'm very interested to see how we can sustain all the different forms and grow them in different parts of the world. Then I think there's the area we need to look at, which is what lessons have we learned from the crisis, particularly I'd say in the sending countries, in how you actually get people who traditionally used cash-based services to actually enroll and use digital services. What lessons have been learned? How do we really cement them? And how do we deal with the people that are consistently identified as outside of the mainstream, financially included people? How do we enable them to be able to send money in a digital world? There's obviously been quite a lot of progress, but I think we see a lot of effort and emphasis on the receiving countries. We haven't seen nearly as much targeted at migrant communities in the send countries. And then there's some more pragmatic questions that we can probably go through later around identification at both sides, and how we can also leverage the digital services for other areas. So I've sort of laid out, I guess, a series of questions. The good news is that right now the digital involvement or the digital solutions for remittances have really increased quite a lot, which is great. The question is, how do we harness them? So I'm now going to turn to Richard, if I can, in Nairobi. No, you're not in Nairobi, are you? You're in Kampala, in Uganda, in East Africa. And Richard is with MTN, and I think well known to many of you, tremendous amount of experience in this space. And MTN have been around for a number of years, have learned a lot, but also keep introducing a lot of new innovations. So Richard, why don't I hand to you so you can enlighten us some more about what you're doing and how you see the market developing and how we can overcome some of these challenges that I've identified.
Okay, thanks, Leon. Thanks, attendees, for attending. From MTN, first, we're the largest mobile network in Africa. We're spread across 17 countries and we're live in 13 countries with mobile transactions. So the first thing I'd say is, let me say our definition of digital. From an MTN perspective, I would say two of your definitions make sense to us. Africa being a receive market. So there's the digital aspect where senders actually use their partners which we have like Remit, Zeepay, Tunes, who we work with from Europe and Asia and America, who are traditionally sending countries. The method they use is that whatever they deposit, whether they use their bank cards, because all these partners have both methods, come to us. They come directly to our mobile wallet. Now, 80% of our customers who receive money in their mobile wallet will end up withdrawing it or cashing out at an agent. So as MTN, we've grown a huge agent network within the continent. We have more than 500,000 agents spread across in different countries for them to cash out. The second is we have a very big enabling ecosystem, because the question is, when I receive my money in digital format, what can I do with the money? So in all the countries, we have person-to-person transfers, which is done locally. We have enabled a network where we can also do merchant payments, or you can buy services and buy goods through digital payments. We can pay bills and utilities. So you can also pay hospital bills, you can do construction, you can do all that, pay water bills, from the convenience of your home. You can buy airtime and all the other services that cash does. For us, our biggest competition is always cash. We don't really compete with one another. We want to compete with cash as it is as COVID has shown us. So maybe to add, maybe something unique to what happened to us during COVID. Almost all African countries, with no exception, implemented curfews and limited movement. So our customers could not cash out as much as they could. So that put a huge amount of pressure on us to grow our ecosystem in terms of the value-added services. So the people who wanted to do, to pay utility bills, buy goods and services, pay for border services. In Africa, we use that as transport, etc. Then the regulators also had a huge push where they tried to ban use of cash because of the transfer of the virus, right? So that also aided in us gaining momentum in terms of use of the digital platform for goods and services and interperson transfers. In terms of those are the two major points that we benefited from, that I've seen that has changed during COVID. And I think that customers will carry that moving forward post-COVID, because they're now, it's part of the sanitize, wash hands, don't touch cash rhetoric that we've had on the media every day. Yeah, so that for us has been very beneficial in terms of COVID. From MTN as well, jumping onto this opportunity, we and Thrive, I don't speak about our own initiatives as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a platform. So we came up with our own app that is just based in Europe, as it is, the MTN Homeland app. I'll be sharing the link after this for people to be able to download it. Or you can send from, now it's just European countries, directly to our mobile wallets. And we've coupled it with airtime. So you can send both money and airtime, which should be hugely beneficial to our customers and generally to do the same three things that you mentioned, to enhance cost efficiencies and financial inclusion. I guess that can give Andrew can add, because Andrew now is our other partners. They're the ones who who bring the money in and initiatives that they've done. Andrew, over to you. Have we lost him?
No, I think he's there. Andrew?
Andrew. Okay, when he comes back, he can just join in and maybe give more insights into it.
Exactly.
So
I mean, yeah, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
No. So that's what we have seen that has become good. In terms of
hello, can you hear me?
Oh, hi, Andrew. Yes, we can.
We can hear you, Andrew. We need your comments. Yes.
Andrew, go ahead. Hello. Richard, maybe you could carry on while we're
well, Andrew's coming
Andrew. Back. Yeah.
Okay. For us, that's the biggest thing we've seen. Also, there's been a huge, I can maybe give you the trend of how much money has been coming in since March when COVID began. At first, we saw a huge spike or in terms of remittances coming in.
Hello, can you hear us at all?
So we had to, I mean, you're back.
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Hello, Andrew. Andrew, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, guys, sorry about that. That's just everybody's chewing up all the data, and Richard's company is keeping all the data.
We're giving it almost for free.
I'm just going to take it from a different angle. But before I do that, I'll introduce Zeepay. So obviously, we do a lot of work with them. Zeepay is traditionally or arguably the largest terminating partner on the continent. Today, we actually do 23 markets. Of course, we've got some star markets like Ghana, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Cameroon, Nigeria, Ivory Coast. We've got some exciting markets. But otherwise, yes, we cover the bulk of the continent doing termination. In Ghana, we're slightly unique in that we run a mobile money business here as well, which means we're able to terminate into our own wallets. But MTN remains our largest partner. I just wanted to take it from a different twist based on the comments you made. So what we are finding is that 60% of the service-side population still remains core immigrants who are formal in the ecosystem. And that group is driving a very interesting statistic. So they are driving the cash to digital play. And they form about cash on certain sides to digital in Africa, mobile money. 80% is still coming from that group. They are not formal and they are in that ecosystem. Then you have another group which is doing 20% of the remaining, and that is digital to digital. The very big players, we've got a lot of about some very strong 10 players who are pushing hardcore this down, trying to really disrupt that. Obviously bigger than World Remit, the likes of Wave, the likes of TapTap, the likes of Remitly. So you've got some serious players in that place, that space, and I'm pushing good traffic. So they form about 20%. Of course, World Remit will still join that group. Small World, you still would have MoneyGram, you know, so you have still pockets of players who join the group to make it quite exciting. But cash from the send side still remain quite high. So we're talking about COVID impact on receive side. Digital is the biggest in terms of impact. Cash is seriously being disrupted. Then another thing that we're finding is that the argument and approach to drive cash, to drive digital more on the receive side. Post-lockdown, most markets are coming out of lockdown. The meltdown is beginning to freeze slowly again. Companies are beginning to wake up. They're coming back to normal business again. But you're slowly finding a lot of people are finding it a lot more safer and cheaper to actually just do a digital transaction. And of course, the likes of MTN has helped significantly with the uptake on merchant payments and the uptake on sort of agents. So now, what influencing the cash, the digital business on the receive side a lot is customers now being able to do multi-channel inclusive approach. Now here, what I mean is, so I get to an agent, he's a merchant, I'll be able to withdraw my money. Because of interoperability in most of the markets, especially in Ghana, I'm still able to take my funds and move on. Italy, I have better control. I run the ecosystem better, if you see what I mean. Now, we're also finding a post-lockdown, another thing that is sort of driving this uptake is some countries are beginning to adopt DFS policies. Some countries are beginning to become a lot more friendlier. There are some markets that are still expensive because the tax component is still on the transaction. So I think from where I sit, this is really the ecosystem. Now the influencers to drive traffic more and more into is being able to do campaign. You have the send money, get this for free. You have TapTap, they get £5 for free. You have Remitly. So those who are running such campaigns are attracting more and more people into it. We're also finding that those who are accepting prepaid cards are also getting more and more people into the ecosystem. Those who don't accept prepaid cards, it kind of takes an informal group on the send side out. Then on the receive side, we're seeing a lot more marketing in the areas of airtime, microinsurance, different types of insurance products, which is really encouraging the uptake. So this is the picture we have on our side. And thank you. Sorry about the earlier bit.
No, that's great. Thanks, Andrew. The line slightly dropping in and out, but generally was much better. I think it's really interesting your insights there, both of you. And I think maybe I start off asking you, Richard, a bit more about your homeland product. Is how are you finding the take up in Europe, I guess, for that? Because it's a mobile wallet type of service, isn't it? Which in the Europe overall, we don't really see generally that much use, and particularly in remittances for mobile wallet driven services. So what sort of barriers have you had to overcome, and how have you done so within that environment?
The biggest barrier first is I don't have any presence in Europe. So trying to market it to my customers, that's the most obvious thing. So we've really tried to do a lot of digital campaigning, both with the receive side to tell our customers that you can actually receive money from your senders using the Homeland app. That's the first thing that we did. Then we've tried to make the process as seamless as possible because so we've had to adapt by doing Me Too kind of thing, like what World Remit does, Remitly does, what MoneyGram does, where we get customers to pair their credit cards. That's the first level we'd have to do. before we start getting adoption of wallets. So before it becomes a wallet-to-wallet kind of service. So that's what we've done first. And we are only doing it first with Europe before we move on to America, which is the biggest sender of remittances into Africa. So that's what we've done so far.
Okay, it might be a bit early, but I think for both of you, it'd be interesting to understand your views on customer retention, customer loyalty once they've joined your service. Are they loyal customers? Richard, maybe slightly early for you, but I'm sure you've got lots of analytics to tell you that. Andrew, you probably got a lot of experience. Is whether they tend to be loyal customers to your brand or whether they're going to other mobile operators as well, as in once they've made the switch and understand how mobile or digital works, are they loyal at that point or do they go somewhere else?
Okay, I can maybe comment on what I've seen from the sending side. Our customers are very price sensitive. So when you get a new player who comes in and gives a very good pricing initiative, the best example is Wave. You must have heard of Wave. They came with a no cost to customers proposition and with a very limited FX spread. That caught like wildfire. So the customers are loyal, yes, to the recipients, because the recipients always are where at the tail end. So our customers will always receive, but we see some numbers changing from different operators. So we see quite a bit of movement from the sender perspective, which brought us to see that indeed price is a very sensitive topic when it comes to sending remittances back home. And that's one thing we've also had to address when we're doing the product. But once a customer starts using the service, we see in our language, we have 30-day active users, RGS 30. It's a very mobile use thing. So we try to retain the customer at least to be active every 30 days on a monthly basis to send money. So, or receive, to be on the platform, to have usage on it. So we've seen that as well. When the service is stable and there's constant, we have that form of retention. As well as being retention as well, what we've seen as MTN, we have seen value adds make a big difference. So if I'm sending you money and I can give free airtime or free data, that would be great. So for example, I should be able to send, like today I can send Andrew some data. So when it comes back and stop complaining that he can say I'm not chewing his bundles. So that is what we have done.
Okay, that's good. Andrew, hopefully you can hear me. I think maybe you can comment on what Richard said, but also on a separate note, you're in 23 countries, I guess, out of 54 in Africa, so getting on for nearly halfway. Are there any particular reasons? Is it just business decisions that you're not in the others? Or what I'd really like to understand is what barriers are there for you to entering markets, but also what barriers are there for the communities of receivers and potentially senders from being able to use digitally based services throughout the continent?
Okay, so I think first of all, on the barrier side, current is mainly compliance, because apart from Ghana where we're mobile money, all other markets we peggy hog, we ride on the back of MTN, Orange, etc., etc. In some cases, aggregators as well. So sometimes the biggest challenge is really the compliance. Sometimes it takes a longer time to complete the compliance process. And I suppose we're working on it. Very soon we'll be resolving all of that. Now, the delay to finish off Africa is mainly COVID. Unfortunately, that part of the business, you got to fly into the country. You cannot do it just by phone and by call. Part of the compliance framework requires them to know who they're dealing with. But we'll get there, we'll finish that. I mean, Richard has been quite instrumental. We're trying to start Guinea-Bissau and a few of that region from Richard's team as well. Now, in terms of customer retention, yes, Richard is right. Price sensitivity is a big one. I find that sometimes it's not just It's not just about giving them freebies, but also giving them the right price. So it's about knowing the game and how to run that game. We are largely treasury driven, and that's really the backbone of our growth, that we operate from a treasury perspective, as opposed to just operating from a pure retail perspective. So that's probably one of the reasons why we're still around. Another benefit or another strategy is obviously to up your game on service delivery. If your game on service delivery is up, at some point the consumer is willing to pay any price once the money will get to the destination. We in Europe, we cover all of Europe and of course the UK itself. We've got some 5 top markets in there for strategic reasons that I don't want to mention, but all these 5 top markets, we've seen that there's been a surge just because of COVID, particularly in Italy. Italy is just, the surge is phenomenal just as a result of COVID.
Okay,
So
Andrew, is that sorry to interrupt, is your Italy surge, I can understand that, you know, they went into lockdown, one of the first countries in Europe. It was probably one of the most severe in terms of the number of locations that had to close. Have you seen, but obviously for the last month or maybe even 2 months, things have become a bit easier. Have you seen those changes on the ground reflected? So I could understand in the earlier stages you'd see a big pickup. Has that carried on or not from your viewpoint?
Oh yeah, significantly. There's been a surge, consistent surge in Italy. Just the more lockdown they came out of, there was a surge. The more people went back to office, there was a surge. You know what I mean? And then of course, their receivers also, the more the local markets. So initially, the more local markets went into lockdown, there was a surge. Then the more the local markets came out of lockdown, there was a surge again. Then of course, patterns is also changed. If you take Ghana, for example, the traditional 3-tier pattern where it was Easter, back to school, and Christmas has changed significantly. The back to school campaign has changed almost to as and when the kids are going back to school. We're also doing rotation. Now we know we have a no child left behind policy in Ghana. So now all kids go to school for free and all kids go to school. And they go to school in rotation. So it's a lot of things have changed so much. So it's created these monthly surges.
Okay, that's, I mean, that sounds absolutely fascinating. So I guess this might be an unfair question for you, but I'm sure some of the audience will be able to contribute their thoughts on this. Is obviously you two are both based in Africa, and we primarily talked about Europe to Africa corridors, and I guess to an extent intra-Africa. But I'm keen to get your perspectives on digital in other parts of the world, whether you've observed it, what you've learned from it, what maybe tips or hints or lessons you would pass on to others looking to try and increase digital usage in, say, the Americas or parts of Asia and so on. So I don't know which one of you would like to go first, but if you could share your thoughts, that would be quite helpful.
I think we've both touched on it slightly here. To increase digital, you need to increase the number of things you can do with your digital payments, the number of people who can accept it, or from a fundamental perspective. So if my advice is build the ecosystem in your country that accepts the digital payments. If I don't go to my local butcher and he doesn't accept digital payments and I want to buy meat, I will not use a digital channel. I'll resort back to cash. So how we look at it from MTN is everything I can do with cash, I should be able to do it on my mobile phone. So in one day, our biggest target is in one day, a customer should be able to do at least 4 or 5 transactions. Because on average, guys do at least 2 transactions a day, whether you're buying food, whether you're paying for transport, or whether you're doing one form or the other. So that is what we'd say, build your ecosystem. in terms of what you can do with your mobile wallet. If it's, as Andrew had said, if it's doing insurance, micro-insurance payments, if it's even doing savings and lending, doing every day-to-day activity that human beings do. Even if it's up to the level of where we're doing micro-investments, etc. That is what I would advise. Build a digital ecosystem for people to be able to use it and make it interoperable. So there should be a lot more collaboration between mobile networks, at least from an African perspective, where we can send freely money amongst ourselves. And the next stage would be where we can have interoperability in terms of agencies, etc. But we're not yet there yet. So that's how to give advice.
Okay.
Also, yeah, there may be one more thing. Maybe it's unfair, but for regulators, and I think we'll touch a bit on this towards the end of the presentation. In terms of KYC, they need to give, I mean, most of the informal workers, the KYC, what they have is probably their ID and their phone number, what they use to register for their mobile number. The minute you tell a small merchant that you need a business registration number as part of your KYC, you need a formal address as part of your KYC, you start eliminating people into the ecosystem. So that's one level of support we need, regulators to be able to differentiate low-risk merchants and have a low-risk profiling and KYC regimen for them. That's what I would say.
Okay, that's quite a lot, really. Can I just ask you about interoperability? Because you said that will come later, not right now or not at the beginning phase. Why do you say that?
Not all countries, not all operators are interoperable. So a few countries have embraced it, and many of the times it's driven by the regulator. From MTN, we saw this and we thought, let's start our own industry-driven one. So we have collaborated with Orange Network in Africa to come up with a platform to enable easy interoperability. It's called Mowali. You must have heard about it in one of the sessions. So that's what we are trying to push in terms from an interoperability perspective, and then get our friends from Vodacom, Airtel, Africell, Tigo, Milcom, and other players to join in, so that you can have an industry-driven platform to be able to incorporate or to broaden our network and create synergies amongst ourselves.
Okay, great. Andrew, do you want to share your thinking? But just before you do, just to say to anybody who's got any questions, please just either use the Q&A, well, initially use the Q&A area, or I'm not sure if we've got the hands up feature here. So I think use the Q&A facility to ask any questions. But sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. If you want to share your global perspective, that would be great.
Well, I think for me, we seem to be all touching about it in different forms, but the largest drive to all of this will be an inclusive approach, where it will be driven mainly by efficiency and pricing, and therefore we have a common platform we can push traffic through. Okay, and we've seen it work for us. Look at us, we're in Europe, and we've opened our platform in Europe to all partners to use, and the partners are able to terminate it into Ghana and other larger corridors in Africa. So it's really being able to see that interoperable platform from that perspective. Secondly, it's also important that players for antitrust purposes will start to see the need for global collaboration at aggregation level. So MTN Zeepay is able to work to aggregate the market in such a way that MTN is still the last mile, but Zeepay is the intermediary, and therefore you don't run into antitrust issues. You must have heard of all the recent antitrust issues coming up in Ghana, the US, and all of that. Then, of course, for me, the third thing is being able to also align the market in such a way that even at the local level, you have ATMs, you have Visa, MasterCard, you have all other instruments being able to receive. But for a larger conversation, this is a story, basically. And that's how I see the market playing. In that way, you tier it, you have intermediaries, and the market works efficiently.
Okay, thank you. Andrew,
and you
Richard,
build local content as well. And you drive local wealth. And that's what it's about. It's about being able to, post-COVID, most markets, what we're realizing is the importance to drive local wealth. Otherwise, what it is really is that anytime we have another shock or pandemic, everybody picks their bags and leave, and you leave the countries like ghost towns.
Okay, great. That's very insightful. Andrew, I was going to give the opportunity to tell us a bit more about the insurance product that Richard was just mentioning in connection with you. And what I was actually quite interested in the whole broad, if you could outline some of the range of products that you're offering right now or in the pipeline that you're able to tell us with, because really you're offering a digital financial supermarket, it seems to me, more than a simple remittance service. So maybe you could just outline some of those more innovative things that you're doing.
Yeah, so one of them is beneficiary insurance. The other one, which will roll out shortly, is the beneficiary pensions. And you're right. I mean, our strategy is to run a financial services supermarket, which allows all players to come in to participate and move traffic. Okay, in that way, you're one for all for one. You don't compete with all, you partner with all. You give them, everybody then now builds agency about their services and then make sure their delivery is intact and efficient.
So how does that actually work with your insurance then? Do you partner with an insurance provider effectively?
Yes, so in Ghana, for example, we have the top 3 insurance companies underwrite for us. But then the product is called Z Micro and is available at point of sale. So when you pick it, based on the corridor, we divert the traffic.
Okay, so basically you've got a captive customer or a customer that you're offering a much broader range of services and then somebody else is fulfilling that service.
Right.
Which means you must spend a lot of your time.
And then we terminate it onto.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
go on.
I was going to say, it must mean you spend a lot of your time building partnerships everywhere then.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea with an open API platform. So we will pick the traffic, we will underwrite it with a third party, but we will terminate it onto MTN. So it's a whole ecosystem, and we aggregate it. So we become a net aggregator for insurance, a net aggregator for remittance, a net aggregator for transactions.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's clear. I was just looking at some of the comments or questions, which I think most people can probably see. So Richard, thank you for being so good at answering. But I think Ricardo was asking what countries are leading the way to scale their digital ecosystems to speed up usability of digital payments. And you've put quite a long list of countries that are all in Africa. So, and I guess MTN is present in all of those countries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any others outside of that continent where you think, they're making good progress in this area at all?
I think some of the Asian countries are making good progress. Like I've seen a lot of work in Myanmar from Ooredoo. They're doing quite a bit of work to speed up digital ecosystems. The rest, not so much. The rest are not really mobile money based. I mean, Europe has gone away with Apple Pay and the rest. They've really tried to do the whole cashless kind of. So I don't think I'll give Europe as an example. From our homegrown solutions, I would say what I've seen good is Myanmar. I've seen a lot of good work from there. The Philippines was also a leader. Bangladesh. I mean, there are some of these countries where they have taken it to a whole other level, other than just cashing out. So to answer Ricardo's question, yes, those are the countries I would say at the top of my mind that are leading the way in growing the ecosystem.
Yeah, okay, great. We've got a good question here. So Andrew and Richard, both feel free to answer this. It's, is it possible to find a temporary solution for those receiving countries that because they only use cash are being affected by the pandemic? So I think that means, I guess countries that were already some way down the digital line were able to cope better and increase digital use much more quickly. But is there anything that countries that are much more dependent on cash can do to try and get a faster switch to digital? So maybe we can turn that round and say what do countries need to do, probably more so than operators, to be, what are the ingredients they need to be able to rapidly increase or introduce digital payment usage. So Richard, maybe you start, and then Andrew, you could come in on that one.
The best one we saw was what Facebook tried to do in Brazil, where you do an over-the-top payment. That's the fastest way you can do for countries that are hugely...
Richard, do you just want to outline for people what a bit more? Yeah. So, sorry, Richard.
Okay.
A line. If you just could outline a bit more, if you don't mind, about what Facebook tried to do, that would help.
Okay. What Facebook tried to do, they tried to do an over-the-top payment on their platform using their own. I didn't think they used their digital currency. Okay, I think they did. They tried to use Libara on it. They were successful for only but 30 days before they were shut down. So to answer the question, what a quick way of scaling up a digital platform is by riding on top of an existing digital or a social media platform. That helps a lot. So that would be one way. If one of those digital platforms came up with a product that could do the payments, but they'd have to go through all the regulatory red tape and bureaucracy. That's one way I would look at it. Another way is to use existing channels that are there. So what happened in India, where they used their post office, because post offices were present in all countries, and they had old ages of host up on a digital level. So using existing cash in and cash out points, but now using a digital, probably like the traditional, but this is giving examples of the poor countries of what is established already on the ground. The rest, there are two ideas I would have. Andrew, are there any you can think about if you want to scale up really fast without putting a lot of investment?
Well, so I think if you want to scale up really fast on the send side, this is on the send side, right? These are the MTOs. Then I think the best is to really partner with a global aggregator. Then you scale it, and then you find your level after that. But of course, yes, in addition to that, I agree with what we're saying though. Now on the local level, if you want to scale fast, then the best way is interoperability, because then that gives you the chance to reach a critical mass rather quicker. But above all, the fastest way to scale is OTT. Now, OTT is what, like Richard said, Brazil, what's happening in Brazil. We have the same product in Spain, where people just send money on WhatsApp. But you would always need a termination rail. So whatever it is, you still need an aggregation in the middle. Either the aggregation is directly to a specific wallet, or you have a distribution wallet, which pushes it to across all markets. So I think this is sort of the way to scale. But then there's also the regulatory challenge. Every regulator will come after you. They will come after you because they have, you see, that's for the sake of financial stability, they need to protect their markets. Every regulator on a national level is looking forward to the dollar or the hard currency coming into the local market to settle and not offshore it, where people actually agree and settle offshore and then pay on the local market. So when regulators pick on that, they will start coming after you. If you look at post-COVID, a lot of our markets have been hard hit. So you're going to find that this will be a challenge. Another thing that I'm beginning to see around the markets is that some markets are beginning to get a little bit more protectionist. So you're finding that now approvals will be not only just based on a single scale that says because you have ABCD, we approve. But regulators will start to lift the veil and look beyond you having everything to see the intentions as well. But that shouldn't stop business from going on, so far as I see it. Business markets will always find their level.
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you for that. I mean, it's interesting because I think it's a great question, and it's one that the UN and a lot of the international bodies have really been trying to look at as well, because I think, as both Andrew and Richard said, there's they've clearly got a lot of good ways of being able to make this work from, let's say, a technical and a market viewpoint. I think the big challenge is the regulatory side in markets where they don't really have much of a digital presence at the moment anyway. So there's sort of some fundamental problems, and it's very difficult to accelerate as quickly as you would want the regulatory environment to attract new companies in or change the way things are done as quickly as one would want. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges which is being grappled with at the moment. I don't personally see any quicker solutions than what the two guys have said. I know we're sort of coming towards the close here. We might have time for another question if somebody has one, but if not, then in the meantime, I was just going to come to, I think, Richard, you threatened that we should talk about regulation anyway, but let's talk about KYC, customer identification, and all those areas. Are you seeing any improvements? I mean, you know, it looks to me like different countries have different approaches. During the COVID crisis, some countries have increased the amount of money that you can hold in a wallet, or lowered the thresholds to make it easier for people to be able to send money, because some of the regulators have understood that actually when we're talking about your traditional cross-border mobile payment, we're not talking about a lot of money, and therefore there may be disproportionate measures in place to stop transactions or to make it harder for transactions to go through. So I wonder whether you've seen any changes, and also which countries would you see have the best approach, or you know, the ones that seem to be most proportionate and easiest for you to do your business to undertake the necessary KYC approach, but also that from the regulator's viewpoint, they've reached a happy understanding of what you're doing and that everything's under control.
The best example I can give, and I know it's unfair, is where I come from Kenya, not even from an MTN perspective. Yeah, the Kenya regulator has constantly supported mobile money growth. So some of the examples you've given, from growing the thresholds you can send money, plus also the KYC, they've understood that they've been real. Like, I'll give you an example. Western Union and MoneyGram have very strict KYC rules, right? And part of their things, and I can imagine Andrew, who was integrating MoneyGram, is that they want an address. So regulators have understood that address is not something that exists in Africa, to be very honest. Well, like 12 Pennsylvania Street does not exist. So that I have seen regulatory accepting that this is not enough. So they have agreed where they can take the name of the person, the first name, last name, phone number, and at some instances, ID. Again, very many African countries do not have a national ID system. So that became a challenge. You cannot just use birth certificates or any other form of identification or passports. So we have seen a lot of support with regulators in terms of doing this. So that I can say there's some movement, but it's very slow. most regulators are still stuck at laws they wrote a long time ago and have not adapted to they have not given it a realistic approach that digital is very difficult to capture this. As MNOs, we have tried to do digital registration of customers, where we can try to get as much information as we can. Yeah, so that's the one initiative we've done from, let's say, from an MNO perspective, where we now capture your picture, your ID, whatever you have, and then try to share with regulators that there's no better person who has KYC than a mobile network. I can tell you who you are, where you work, where you sleep, who you call. So in case of any query, I have a lot of information on a given individual, which we freely share with a court order following the procedure that needs to come through. So that's what we've tried to do with regulators, etc.
Okay, so some are listening and acting, but not enough, I guess, is what I'm hearing you stand there.
Not enough. They need to have meetings amongst themselves and say, what has that guy done right? Where you can have 26 million registered customers actively using a mobile money platform per month. It's phenomenal how they do it. And it's that. Also for having the merchants, you don't have to have tons of paperwork. So those are things that I've seen happening.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Andrew, what about from your perspective, KYC and actually probably compliance in general, really?
Okay, so it's interesting Richard used Kenya as a perspective. I guess that's the bias. Everybody uses the country they are domiciled in. For me, I like to say that the Ghana model seems to have worked well for us, where Ghana actually took an initiative to create a national ID system like Rwanda, a digital ID, digital address. So we have something called a GH Post, which is a digital address. So if you take out mobile money, for example, you actually can onboard with your digital address. The benefit with that is that it solves that problem because one-stop shop, you know where the person is. The reality is yet to be tested in full for you to know how powerful it is and how efficient it is. That's just the reality. So it's only a function of time and we'll know how powerful it is. I also agree with Richard that there needs to be a lot of cross-border interaction. If we take even just by economic blocks, ECOWAS, EAC, regulators should actually allow for passport, etc. To move faster in silence. It's an interesting one, but I hope that the AFTAC would also change all of that thinking and encourage that. I know that in West Africa, there's already a movement going on, which is designed to help all of us get to that point. So it's only a function of time, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a question of how much time we've all got to go through to get that to happen, I think. I'm going to draw it to a close in a sec, but just wanted to ask each of you, maybe start with you, Andrew, just for any final thoughts on how you see things developing over the next 12 months. Just a few thoughts, and then Richard, I'll give you the opportunity to have the same question.
Well, I think for me, Leon, I'll even stick to the next 6 months. I'll stick to December. I see that in markets like Ghana, digital will see another 25% uptake, which will mean that the cash volumes will drop. We'll finish the year with cash hovering around 2.9 billion, and then about a good maybe 700 million will be digital. Once we hit that peak, the following year we'll go for a free fall. So that's how I see it. The second thing is, if you look at the larger Africa play, I think Ghana, Kenya is setting an example, which would also become another driver. I also think, I secretly believe that MTN would at some point turn on remittance into wallet in South Africa. If they do that, that will have a huge explosion on the SADC region and would open it up because South Africa is a market leader as a country from a regulatory perspective. In Europe, we'll continue to grow, we'll continue to take markets. It will be a lopsided argument. It will not go left or right. It will just keep going. Aggregation will go on. But there'll be dominant aggregators like Zeepay, who would emerge above all the four key players. And we will take the market and continue to control it. I hope with Richard on the call, we'll be able to build a stronger bond, MTN and Zeepay. So that's sort of how I see the market playing. But Richard is a very good friend of mine, though.
Yeah, of course you will. Definitely. I've sent you an email as well. Just check.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, then maybe to answer your question, I think I'll give you a Christmas present by December. We'll go live with South Africa for remittances.
Right.
By then, yeah. So yes, that will be key. To answer Leon's question, I see sustained growth from a receive side because we have really grown ecosystems. So there's a sustained growth in terms of digital usage that I'll see happening with intra-continent. And also from your end, Andrew, there's sustained growth, to be very honest, because more and more guys are sending from a digital perspective. There are some of my partners who have grown almost 100% since January.
Right.
Growth that I did not anticipate. I would mention them here just to give them props, but they have done a tremendous job in terms of marketing the service and going live with it. So I would say this trend for digital is going to be sustained completely. It's for regulators now to push it to the next level, where it's not just focusing on P2P, but focusing it on B2B system, transactions as well for business payments. That will also create more growth in terms of this sector.
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you very much for being very engaged, sharing so much of your thoughts, and also being so optimistic. Quite often we get bogged down in pessimism, so it's great to do that. I think the message I take from both of you is that the future for digital, whatever we've seen so far, is just the beginning, and actually it's going to accelerate away. I guess the advantage is particularly to those who are in the market now, because as we said, digital is still only accounting for, across the whole market, somewhere probably around 20%. So if you're strong now, you've got a very good position to grow into the future. Thanks to everybody for listening. Hopefully it was quite insightful. And once again, Richard and Andrew, thanks very much. Claudia, back to you.
Hi, Leon. Thank you very much. Once again, everybody for joining us. Our team will write a blog about this virtual roundtable. So questions that were asked and you answered, Richard, they will be included there. I hope everybody enjoyed this interesting discussion and our amazing panelists that we had this time. You're all invited to join us at the Platinum Network to stay connected, because we want to see you. Maybe next year we'll see ourselves in a presential event. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, Richard.
Cheers. Bye.